upgrades them and uplifts them to ruchnius, then he gets to the level that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with him all the time.
Wherever you get your podcasts from, or our own website, prismoftorah.org. This is The Prism of Torah with Rabbi Asaf Aaron Prisman.
Shalom Uvracha. In this week's parsha, Parshas Vayechi, the first pasuk says how many years Yaakov lived, and on that pasuk, the first Rashi, the very first Rashi, asks the following question: how come this parsha is closed? Closed meaning parsha stuma, which means between each parsha there's a certain amount of spacing between the parshas, and dafka over here there's no spacing. Only one space to differentiate between the words. And the question is, why? Why is this parsha stuma? Says Rashi, because it's to hint us and say that because Yaakov passed away, because lefishe kevan sheniftar Yaakov Avinu, then that impacted Klal Yisrael, and their eyes and hearts were also closed. Nistemu eineihem velibam shel Yisrael mitzarat hashi'abud she'atchilu shavdam, which means the eyes and the hearts of Klal Yisrael were closed, and hence they suffered from the tzarat hashi'abud, the enslavement in Mitzrayim. Says the Heilige Nesivos Shalom, there's a very strong diuk over here. It did not say that as a result of Yaakov dying, suddenly there was enslavement, and the enslavement in Egypt and Mitzrayim impacted Klal Yisrael, and that's why their hearts and eyes were closed. But rather, it says that because Yaakov passed away, that caused directly their hearts and eyes to be closed, and hence they were vulnerable to the negative impact of being enslaved by Mitzrayim. So we want to understand, that's question number one, what is it about Yaakov Avinu that when he was alive, there was obviously some sort of impact on Klal Yisrael that helped them cope with situations such as enslavement in Mitzrayim? What's so unique about Yaakov that had this midah, this characteristic that impacted the world, the spiritual world, of course, that helped Klal Yisrael be able to withstand the enslavement that they weren't able to do so after he passed away? And the other question is, we know that a very famous drasha on the pasuk, Ele toldot Yaakov, Yosef, that's all it says, that the offspring of Yaakov is Yosef. Now we know that Yaakov had a lot more offspring than just Yosef, but yet there's something very intrinsic and coupled between Yaakov and Yosef. Yosef is the continuation of Yaakov. Rashi over there on that pasuk tells us they were very similar in many ways. Without getting into details, even from a Kabbalistic perspective, we know they were very, very similar, because Yaakov represents the sphere of Tiferes, whereas Yosef is the one of Yesod, and it's very similar, very close to each other. So whatever Yaakov gave over in the spiritual world, why wasn't Yosef able to compensate for that? Answers in the Nesivos Shalom, a very, very interesting mahalach that we'll learn a lot from. And he says the following: Yosef, what he was able to do is use holiness, Kedusha, and he used the Kedusha to be able to help himself not fall into any trap of the Yetzer Hara when it comes to Isurim, to do things that are forbidden. This screams out in the famous episode we discussed several times, when Eshet Potiphar tries to persuade him to do the sin and be with her. And hence, he used the Kedusha to refrain from doing so. However, what Yaakov did is something, a step even more than that. And that is, he took mundane things we do in life that are not necessarily an Isser. They're not forbidden, they're permitted, and some are even required, such as eating and sleeping, and some working. And that, he used Kedusha to elevate it. He elevated that, elevating something that's just chol, mundane, and he turned it into Kedusha, elevating the physical to spiritual. This idea of Yaakov injecting Kedusha in every aspect of his life screams out in what we say in benching all the time, Kedoshenu Kedosh Yaakov, the holiness of Yaakov, that he injects in everywhere, Kedusha. This concept about Yaakov is hinted in many places in Chazal, and even in the Chumash itself, we see how much the Torah invests in speaking out the stories of Yaakov. Why? Because each story of Yaakov, even though it's a regular story about him getting married and him having kids and him working in Lavan's place, and the trick he did on Lavan with ensuring that the offspring will be of certain type, all that is invested a lot into explaining that in the Torah. Why? Because anything to do with Yaakov, it changes into Kedusha. All these events look like regular physical Gashmis events, but really, to all of these, when a person learns Be'iyun, these psukim, it's full of Kedusha. And the epitome of that is if one learns Kisvei Arizal, one of his Sfarim, that all his Sfarim wrote his famous Talmud Reb Chaim Vital, and in there you see how several things that had to do with Yaakov, like Akudim and Vudim, these are, each one of them is a whole world of Kedusha. If one learns Be'iyun, also the Hoshanos we say in Sukkos, that we say them to be Me'oire Rachamim, to have Rachamim from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we also spend time over there speaking about Yaakov, as it says, Hoshana leman patzel berehatim. As well, if you look at the word Yaakov, we know that it comes from the idea that he was holding the akev, the heel of Esav. Akev, spelled Ayin Kuf Beis. Rashi Tevis, the acronym of that, is Kadesh Atzmecha Bamutar. Take whatever is permissible, but not necessarily a mitzvah, and upgrade that to be Kedusha. That is what Yaakov represented. He took anything to do with this world, Olam Hazeh, and upgraded and uplifted it to be Kedusha. Based on this, we can also explain that when Yosef had the nisayon of being with Eshet Potiphar, he suddenly saw the image of his father Yaakov, and what was it that impacted him? He said, wait, my father was able to take Kedusha, and he used that idea by even elevating something that was not even an avera, but just not a mitzvah, and he elevated. So I'm not going to use the same source of Kedusha to at least refrain from Isser. And indeed, if we look closely to our religion, Yiddishkeit, one can see that indeed there is a very strong element of uplifting the physical. If you take, we'll give one example. If we take wine, which we know represents extreme gashmis, and even perhaps taiva, but yet you see that wine, drinking of the wine, plays a very vital role in Yiddishkeit. That's because we're elevating the wine, something that represents physicality. We're dafka taking that and upgrading it and uplifting it. We see that because we use wine for Kiddush, we use wine for Havdalah, we use wine for Bris Milah, we use wine for Purim, we use wine for Pesach. It's an unbelievable concept that is a game changer. As we know, there's even a Shulchan Aruch that talks about the importance that we do mundane things such as sleeping and eating. It's very important that you have kavana. You have in mind, I'm doing this so I'll be able to have more strength and be more connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like we always quote the Mesilas Yesharim at the beginning, he says, don't forget, all this world is only about doing Torah, mitzvahs, and getting closer to Hashem. So if you do anything for physical enjoyment, that's okay if it's a means to the end game of getting closer to Hashem. But if it's just an end, that's a horrible thing. Another hint to this idea that Yaakov represents this is it says in the Gemara in Brachos Daf Kaf Vav Amud Beis that Yaakov Avinu, he is the one that founded the Tefillah of Arvis, which we know there's an opinion in the Gemara that says Tefillah Arvis is not mandatory. You could do it, but you don't have to. It's reshus. But that's the whole idea. Taking something that's reshus and elevating it. That again is a similar idea to taking something that you don't have to do and you're doing it and you're elevating it with Kedusha. There's the Gemara in Shabbos, Masechet Shabbos Daf Kuf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, and it speaks about that whoever is ma'anig the Shabbos, he gets nachala bli mitzarim. And how do we know that? Nachala bli mitzarim, he gets unbelievable Yerusha and good things without any boundaries. And he brings the pasuk about Yaakov. Sheneemar im tavshiv mishabat reglecha, etc. Ve'echalticha nachalas Yaakov avicha. Why? Because the nachla of Yaakov, whatever Yaakov gets, is also without boundaries. And the question is, what's unique about Yaakov that he gets a nachala bli mitzarim without boundaries? Elamai, according to what we're saying, it's geshmak. It's very good. Mida keneged mida. Just like Yaakov Avinu takes Kedusha and makes no boundaries to Kedusha because he flips over and takes even something that's mundane and chol and turns it into Kedusha. So too, he turned everything to Ruchnius. So too, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Mida Keneged Mida will give him reward and nachala without any boundaries. Once a person reaches that stage that he flips over anything that he comes in contact with to Kedusha, to ensure he does the number one goal in life, which is Kivas Elokim, and to mimic Hashem's Midos, then he'll reach a level of, as it says in the pasuk, Az titzaneg al Hashem. That's the same pasuk. It says titaneg al Hashem. You'll connect Hashem and you'll have oineg. You'll have a geshmak time in this world and of course the world to come. As it says in Tehillim, Kapitel Tehillim Lamed Vav, Kimcha b'kol chaim. when you're connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then you have Chaim, you have Chayus. You're alive. Why? Because when a person doesn't connect to Hashem, and even if he doesn't do an Avera, but his life is all about nothingness, he's just doing mundane things, sleeping, eating, wasting his time. He didn't do any Isurim, didn't do anything, something that's forbidden, but even that creates a mechitza between him and Hashem. And therefore if you're connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have Chayus, you have life, you inject yourself with spirituality. A person that takes everything that comes in contact with him, and even mundane things, and upgrades them, and uplifts them to ruchnius, to Kedusha, then he gets to the level that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with him all the time. As it says, nothing stirs him. Gan ki elech begeitz al mavis, says David HaMelech. Lo yirara. Why? Nothing bad's going to happen to me. I'm not worried. I'm not going to feel the bad. Ki ata imadi. When a person is on that level, he doesn't have any mechitzas. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us several tools to ensure that we'll be able to live a life that is continuously changing and taking and uplifting anything we do during the day and uplifting it to make it b'kedusha. First of all, we know the famous pasuk, Ma Hashem mevakesh mi'imach ki im li'ira oisoi. What is HaKadosh Baruch Hu already asking from you? Just to have fear of Hashem. The Gemara darshans, Al tikri ma ela mea. 100. What's 100? 100 brachos a day. From here we learn that a person should do his best to say 100 brachos a day. And the question begs itself, what's the correlation to the pasuk, to the content of the pasuk? I understand that the word ma is similar to mea, but it has to be something deeper than that. And perhaps the answer is because the context is about fearing Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us a tool to ensure we're living with Hashem. And when you live with Hashem, then you have this constant fear and awe type of fear, realizing that everything is from Hashem and we're always taken care of. If you make 100 brachos a day, that's a constant reminder to realize, wow, Hashem gave me this opportunity to eat this apple. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me an opportunity for this, for that, for everything. And through that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps us, gives us a tool to ensure we'll be able to live a life that we upgrade everything into spirituality. The same is true about the famous Rabbi Hanan ben Kasha Oimer Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu lezakois es Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to give us the merit of doing mitzvahs. Lefichach hirba lahem Torah mitzvahs. He gave us Torah and many mitzvahs. Shenemar Hashem chafetz l'mad tzedko yigdil Torah b'yadir. Also here, it's a tool. HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have given us only one mitzvah, but no. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us many mitzvahs, so that in all aspects of life, we have a mitzvah wherever we are, whatever we do. We eat, we smell, we see a rainbow. It doesn't matter. We have so many opportunities to do mitzvahs. We have all the chagim. We have during the day. We have birkus hashachar. Everything. Why? To ensure we're surrounded by an opportunity to flip over something and make it into kedusha. Because that, as we know, is what life is all about. Now we are ready to bring home the answer to the original question that we asked. What is so unique about Yaakov? That we already asked. What is unique about Yaakov is that he brought this midah down to the world. And when he was alive, everyone was able to tap into this midah in a way easier way. This midah of turning everything into Kedusha. And hence, when everything is turned into Kedusha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Shechina is mamash close with us. And we feel that we're connected to Mekor HaChai. We feel that, like David HaMelech says, even if we're going into the fires, the dangerous fires, lo yirara, we're not going to be worried. It's not going to stir us. It's not going to change us. We're still going to be strong and be able to walk through any nisayon, because we're going to feel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us. However, once Yaakov went to Olam Haba, then Bnei Yisrael were left without that special shield that helps protect us from any nisayon, any difficult nisayon that comes. And hence, once we didn't have that protective layer, only then the shibud that came affected us. But had Yaakov been around, we would have been able to persevere. And hence, it's only thanks to Yaakov, something that Yosef, that element on his level, he didn't have, like Yaakov. And we needed that in order to be able to persevere the shibud of Mitzrayim. And hence, yes, because Yaakov left, nistimu eineihem v'libam shel Yisrael, and that removed that shield we're talking about, and hence the ripple effect was that the shi'abud in Mitzrayim impacted them. And this is all hinted in the fact that parsha is closed, stuma, without proper spacing, like we usually have between parshas. Yiratzoin, that we'll each take upon ourselves something, one element in our lives that will upgrade to have tol kedusha. We'll try to seek and be more conscious of where in our lives we can turn something that's mundane, like sleeping or eating, and have a kavana, that we'll do this in order to have more strength to do Avodas Hashem. We eat to have more strength to do Avodas Hashem, or sleep, or whatever it is. We can turn it over into having Kedusha. And when we have Kedusha, we're connected to Makor Rachaim, Morta Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Shechina will be here, will protect us, especially in these days. How much do we need protection from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Yiratzon that we'll be able to put Kedusha no matter what we're doing, even if we're walking from place A to place B, to say Tehillim, to learn something Ba'al Peh, that we'll be able to quickly do, and we won't be dependent on anything. B'zchut zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring us the nitzachon over our enemies. Have a good chat.
This concludes another episode of the Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yona Vefa for the recording equipment and Eli Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on the Prism of Torah.